Good morning, seventh grade. It is Friday morning, Cougar Wear Friday, and we're almost finished with section or with Unit 5 in your grammar. Today we're on 5.10, infinitives as adverbs. Now, adverbs are parts of speech that modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. They answer questions like to what extent something is happening or where or when something was happening. So if we look at page 102, it says an infinitive, and remember, infinitives always start with the word to, and then they have the main verb with them. And if you get hung up on what infinitives are, what they look like, I want you to go back into the lessons in Unit 5 and look over that information so that it can be a little bit clearer to you. But an infinitive can be used as an adverb, it says on page 102, to describe a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Study the infinitives used as adverbs in these sentences. So in the first sentence, Butch went, and then, to see the old sailing ship in the harbor. To see is the infinitive construction of the verb, but the infinitive phrase is to see the old sailing ship in the harbor. And in this case, that infinitive tells us more about where Butch went. It's not a direct object. In this case, it's modifying the verb went. It's telling more information about where he went. He was disappointed to learn of its departure the day before. In this case, it's describing the adjective disappointed. And we know that disappointed is an adjective. It's actually a subject or complementing adjective, an adjective complement, because it's telling more about he equals what? Disappointed. So it's a adjective complement in this case, or he equals disappointed. That's an adjective. He is disappointed. That, though, the phrase to learn of its departure of the day before, that's your infinitive phrase, and it modifies disappointed. The third example says he arrived too late to see it. In this case, to see it is your infinitive phrase. It's functioning as an adverb, and it's describing the adverb late. Now remember, adverbs will tell when something happens. So because he was too late, late is an adverb, and to see it is an infinitive that is modifying late, which is also an adverb. So when we use infinitives as adverbs, they're used to modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. And the modifying of another adverb is what's happening in the third example. Now, it says identify the infinitives used as adverbs in these sentences. What does each infinitive phrase describe? I didn't know enough to explain the history of the clipper ship. I visited the library to get a book on clipper ships. I was determined to learn more about them. In the first sentence, I didn't know enough to explain the history of the clipper ship. To explain the history of the clipper ship is your infinitive that's acting as an adverb. To explain is your main infinitive, and then the rest of the words that complete that phrase make up the infinitive phrase. It's being used as an adverb, and it tells you in the first sentence, the infinitive phrase to explain the history of the clipper ship describes the adverb enough. I didn't know enough. Then the phrase to explain the history of the clipper ship. In the second sentence, to get a book on clipper ships explains the verb visited. I visited the library to get a book on clipper ships. To get a book on clipper ships tells us why you visited the library. So it's modifying visited, which is a verb in that case. And in the third sentence, the infinitive phrase to learn more about them describes the adjective determined. I was determined to learn more about them is the infinitive phrase, and it's describing determined, which is an adjective. Remember, I equals determined. Now, I want you to think about how those infinitives are working as adverbs, modifying verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. The last part of the instruction paragraph says, notice that an infinitive that describes a verb often answers the question why or how. And as I mentioned earlier, adverbs tell to what extent, like I'm very tired. Very tells to what extent you're tired. So very is not an adjective, it's an adverb telling to what extent or how tired you are. When an adverb is also used not only for to what extent, but to tell how or why about something. Like remembering, adverbs modify adjectives, verbs, and other adverbs. They're going to answer questions like how, why, and to what extent. So keep that in mind as you're looking to see how those adverbs are working. Now, we are going to do exercise 2 on page number 103. Exercise 2 says identify each infinitive phrase used as an adverb. And now remember, infinitive phrases always begin with the word to, and then they have a main verb, and they have other words to complete that thought or that phrase. So you're first going to write out the phrase, then tell the word that it describes, and that word's part of speech. So the part of speech is going to be an adjective, a verb, or another adverb. So in sentence number 1, it says we sat on the we sat on the deck to listen to the crew member. Now, to listen to the crew member, remember it starts with to, and then it usually has the main verb after it. To listen to the crew member is your infinitive phrase. So you're first going to write that. So to listen to the crew member equals, what does it modify? Look at that sentence. We sat on the deck to listen to the crew member. It's telling you why, and it's telling you more about sat, why you sat. So then your second part of the answer will be the word sat. And then the last part of your answer is determining if the word sat is a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. And in this case, it's an action, so we know that it's a verb. So your answer is going to be to listen to the crew member, comma, sat, comma, verb. So 3 answers for exercise 2. This is due for Tuesday. Have a wonderful Friday. You are really close to the end of this unit, so you will be having a test next week. God's blessings.